Let's watch this one. We got How Anime Beat Disney.
On November 11th, 2022, Tokyo's busiest intersection, Shibuya Crossing, was brought to a standstill as the LED screens surrounding the intersection streamed one of the most anticipated events of the past 25 years.
Do it, Pikachu! Agility now!
This is the moment when Ash Ketchum
Oh,
from Pallet Town finally became the Pokemon World Champion.
After 40 years.
Ash's win gained almost 500,000 likes on Twitter and was reported by news publications across the world. This fictional event that bled into the real world is just one example of how Japanese animation has managed to capture the hearts of people around the world. And in fact, the global demand for anime in the past 4 years has skyrocketed. In 2021, Sony acquired an anime streaming service for around $1.2 billion.
Jesus, that's a lot of
The
money.
major streaming services are fighting for distribution rights and pumping millions into Japanese animation,
ありがとうだってばよ
including one of its competitors, Disney. And the most famous American restaurant in history, McDonald's, rebranded itself in a recent marketing campaign as
Hey, did y'all go to McDonald's during this? Did y'all go to McDonald's during this campaign? Did y'all try that sweet chili sauce?
McDonald's, its anime counterpart. But wait. Now I'm lost. Because when I grew up, liking anime was not cool. But now it seems to be everywhere.
Attack on Titan's really just carrying the whole thing right now.
Like No Face and Spirited Away.
The anime culture has seen a massive rise in India amongst the younger generation.
30,000 people racing to get inside the Anime Expo.
Does Samuel L. Jackson like anime?
Yes,
I went to Anime Expo. It was cool.
So I wanted
cool.
to figure this out. But I have to admit, my anime knowledge is limited. I could probably give you a deep dive on old school Pokemon, but I don't think that's gonna cut it. So I decided to spend all my free time watching anime, looking at the work that inspired it. I attended an anime event to immerse myself in the fanbase, and I spoke to some of the leading voice actors in the industry to try and figure out how this art form traveled from Japan, transcended nerd culture, and became the fastest growing genre in the world.
Well, we already know that answer.
To understand the global success of anime today, we have to start this story in Japan, obviously, but like way back in what was called the Edo period. This is a time where the country was isolated from the rest of the world, so the art form that emerged during this time was radically different from anything anyone had ever seen before. One of those art forms was manga. It originated from Chinese and Japanese literature. And here's one of the most famous early examples from 1831. You've probably seen it, but never thought of it as manga. There's also hour-long videos on YouTube about the whole history of manga. There's so much to explore here, told by people who know about it in a lot of depth, but I'm condensing a lot of this because this is a video about anime. So we're now jumping forward to when Japan finally opens its borders to outsiders. People were super into these different aspects of Japanese life, including its art. And it worked both ways. Japanese artists discovered Western work that influenced their own. Over time, thanks to American and European artists, manga started to include a more familiar comic strip style aimed at younger audiences. And at the turn of the century, this guy, Kitazawa Rakuten, who's regarded as one of the founders of modern manga, started creating multi-frame stories. And a few decades later, in 1928, quite possibly the most important character in this story was born, Tezuka Osu.
That's what got you started.
He's often called the god of manga, so he's kind of a big deal. He basically looked at what had come before him over the centuries and combined this art form with a new fantastical style of storytelling, giving his characters these cute curvy characteristics and large eyes. Essentially, his style is now universally what manga is known as, and its roots are actually found in early American animation. At this point in time, to the West, American artists had already been producing animation since the turn of the century, but the big milestones were Steamboat Willie in 1922 because of its synchronized sound, and the first animated feature film, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, in 1937. Obviously, animators at the time didn't have access to the tools we have today, so animators drew everything by hand on translucent paper. They could then flip through their drawings to give movement, kind of like when you used to doodle a stickman jumping on your notebook when you should have been paying attention in school.
That's just extraordinary.
So I want to briefly explain what gives anime that unique style, and without getting too technical, the basics are that our eye can only hold an image for approximately 1/10 of a second. So we need a multitude of images shot in succession to appear like they're moving. US animators work with 1s and 2s, aka one image is shown for every 2 frames, which means 12 drawings per second. This gives motion, but it can look a little bit choppy. To make it smoother, they can use 24 drawings per second. Anime, on the other hand, works more with freeze, a new image every 3 frames. It looks even more clunky, but it means less drawing, and Japanese animators used it as a way to focus more on detailed visuals. Anime is also known for having more emphasis on camera movement, so they would either pan, tilt, or zoom in on a scene to show more movement without having to do a lot of extra drawing. But back in the US, these resources of money and manpower weren't an issue for Disney, who streamlined the animation process.
Oh, they were
And
popping
those
that
films
bread.
showed everybody, not just animators, that Walt Disney was one of the world's best storytellers at the time.
I put all my artists back in school. Art schools that existed then didn't quite have enough for what we needed. We were dealing in motion, movement, the flow of movement, the flow of things, action, reaction, all of that. So we had to set up our own school.
And you can bet that that had a huge influence on a young Tezuka. This
Wait,
is
they
his
had their
best-selling
own
character,
school?
Atom, and you can see he
Bro,
has
they
the
had so much money, they made their own school to put their artists through it. That's crazy, bro.
rounded
Hey,
aesthetics
that's
of a
respect.
Disney
That's
character.
why Disney's got so much money.
But the Second World War put a pause on the art form.
On Sunday, December 7, 1941, a state of war has existed between the United States and the Japanese Empire.
And instead, these expressions of art became tools of wartime propaganda. And it wasn't just Japan. American cartoonists engaged in similar propaganda. But after the US bombed Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945, Japan surrendered, ending their part in the war and leading to a 7-year-long occupation by American soldiers. During this period, US soldiers were reading comic books like Batman and Superman. Publishers in Japan saw the success in America and wanted their own version of these characters. But Bruce Wayne and Clark Kent were masculine, powerful characters, and many children in Japan weren't now growing up without a father or a brother figure in a post-war world. And this is where Tezuka creates Atom, a cute, androgynous,
Astro
and
Boy.
emotional character who always wanted peace and had a ton of friends. His stories were an outlet for a generation of children and adults impacted by war. And in the following decades, manga really took off across Japan. Okay, some of these examples have been translated into English, but you'll get the picture. This is why some people call Tezuka the strong title. He started introducing frames focusing on a singular scene, giving momentum and an intimate feeling to the action. So we have this distinct art form that focuses in on a character's emotion and balances it with action and is influenced by early Disney animation. And let's just try to imagine how much Tezuka must have wanted to turn his characters into moving images after seeing everything happening in America. Okay, I just want to take a minute to present a what-if situation. What if Tezuka was born 60 years later? Well, he would have been able to sell his manga on Shopify, who happens to be the
Okay.
sponsor
Really, buddy?
in it.
Now I got my video buffered up, bro, because I had to skip this. Come on.
To give a name to my very opportunity to Shopify couldn't see characters into moving animations was about to come true. Tezuka got his wish, and Fuji Television Network turned his best-selling manga Mighty Atom into an animated series. But for anime to really succeed, it needed to find an audience outside of Japan. And that brings us to the first big hurdle in making these stories mainstream. These shows were written for children and adults who had experienced warfare in Japan. But this new American audience, especially the youth, they couldn't relate to that. And NBC, who decided to bring Mighty Atom to the US, worried that American children wouldn't be able to handle the violence depicted in the same way. And of the 12 episodes sent over, only 6 of them were accepted. And this sucked for Tezuka because he was relying on the money from the American broadcast rights to fund future projects. Astro Boy, was then assigned an NBC producer, whose job was to edit certain aspects of the show, making them less violent and more culturally accessible to the US. It was stuff like changing "he's dead" to "oh, he's unconscious, let's get him to the hospital." And they even made changes to the theme tune to make it sound less militaristic. But finally, in 1963, Astro Boy became the first show to ever air in America, and the following decades brought a number of influential films and shows to the rest of the world.
There's a boom market in animated features.
Our stage is Neo Tokyo.
But in Japan, many animated films are made for older audiences, and one of the best
is anime. Spirited Away.
I think the reason why anime beat Disney is because, like, cartoons are strictly for kids, right? Anime has a wide audience, you know? There's anime that you can put on just for kids, but there's anime for adults, there's animes for teens, there's anime all through all walks of life, you know? So, like, Disney, they only got a chokehold over one thing, like, childhood, you know, being a child and being a parent that got to take your child to see those movies. But, like, teenagers not going to see no Disney movies.
I am Miyazaki.
Well,
maybe like darker themes, but nothing compared to what anime has. Nowhere even close.
All this was happening, Western animation was also having huge success. Disney was releasing films like The Little Mermaid, and in 1995, a small company called Pixar released the first ever CGI feature film called Toy Story.
Look, Daddy!
What's that, Andrew?
Toy Story!
Oh, yeah.
Yes, I was a big Toy Story fan. Everybody was. And it changed the entire industry. These were the films that I grew up on in the 90s, and Pokemon, obviously. What boy in 99 didn't want to be Ash Ketchum running around catching Pokemon? For me, that was my first introduction to Japanese animation. There was Digimon, Dragon Ball Z, but Pokemon was the one that I connected to the most. I knew that it was Japanese and that it looked different from the other shows that I watched, but it was dubbed in English, and to my 6-year-old brain, it was just mixed in with all the other Western cartoons that I was watching. And they were made for kids. And then I just grew out of them. But back in Japan, the country was going through what was called the Lost Decade. In 1990, the economy collapsed. But the eventual result of the economic collapse surprisingly had potential for the anime industry.
Anime is increasingly visibly popular in both Japan and outside of Japan. It's kind of impossible to ignore this, not just popularity, but economic impact of it as a type of media product, particularly in the early 2000s. This is part of a broader movement called Cool Japan. It's a nation branding campaign. The aim is to essentially promote anime to present a positive soft power image of Japan.
Unlike in the West, anime wasn't just
that makes sense
for
though,
kids.
because think about it, like how many people that watch anime think like, oh, I want to go visit Japan. Like it definitely promotes like Japan and like coming to tour it, being like a tourist, you know.
Under these pressures to make content for everybody, artists found new ways to tell stories that spoke to a variety of people. And with the legacy of the bombings and the occupation weighing heavily on people, it offered more grittier, more violent, and more political stories.
There's a little more violence in it. That's something I noticed as a kid. I used to watch G.I. Joe, and every time a helicopter crashed, you would see the parachute come out. And I think they had to do that. They were like, yeah, nobody can die. And you have main characters dying in other shows in anime at the same time.
And anime just is more gory.
A character can die.
Yeah.
And you can be affected by that.
Okay, so I've been watching a handful of shows over the past few weeks. I got recommendations from friends, looking on Reddit, Netflix, Crunchyroll. There was a lot out there, so I just started by seeing what caught my attention and kind of went from there. Right now, I'm liking Naruto, Attack on Titan.
No way you're making a video about anime and you just pronounce Naruto wrong. Come on, bro.
JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, Hunter x Hunter, and oh, I checked out Heroku no Go from like the early 2000s. A bit of a different vibe, but it's cool. And I'm pretty sure that all of these were manga adaptations. And I'm starting to get FOMO that this is only recently clicked for me. But starting with Attack on Titan told me two things. It's definitely not a kid's show. And they have continuous storylines.
So if you're watching Scooby-Doo, it's irrelevant what order you watch the show in. When Robotech came out, I would watch this and it was this soap opera saga. And it was like, what's going to happen next? You don't want to miss an episode. Now, anime is not the only thing to do that, but traditionally Western cartoons did not do that.
One of the first ones that I watched was Attack on Titan.
Oh yeah, some adult themes there.
But the first episode, I was so connected to these characters and
right.
The death scene in the beginning, I was like, oh wow, they went there.
Yeah.
They showed it, but that really affects those main characters. And
Yeah.
Then I'm super invested.
That's exactly what it does. It makes you very invested in what's happening.
So it's been really easy for me to find and binge anime. But that wasn't always the case.
If you wanted to watch anime, there were no channels for it. And of course, this is really before the internet had blown up, so it wasn't like you could go to YouTube or anything. You'd have to find a rental place that actually had a small anime section, and then you'd rent stuff. And that was basically the only way you could see anime.
Keith is an American voice actor for a ton of English versions of anime. In the 2000s, the VHS and DVD versions helped make it more readily available because you could now watch dubbed or subtitled versions. The 1988 film Akira gained only $1 million at the box office in America. But thanks to its home release, it was cemented as a groundbreaking success for anime in foreign markets. We're like 3/4 of the way into this video, and I bet there are people screaming at me to talk about these films. And yes, it would be impossible to talk about the rise of anime without talking about Studio Ghibli, a Japanese animation studio created by Hayao Miyazaki and his business partner Isao Takahata. And when I was in Japan, there was something about the art style and being there that gave me this sense of amazement. But Miyazaki has earned the most commercial and critical success in the US out of any other Japanese animator. There's also a 2013 documentary on Studio Ghibli that's just fascinating if you want to go a bit deeper into that world. But in 1996, Studio Ghibli signed an international distribution deal with guess which American studio? Yeah, Disney.
Yeah.
Essentially raising the studio's global status and furthering anime's popularity abroad. The deal included high-end video releases of all-feature films and characters voiced by A-list actors like Mark Hamill, Matt Damon, and Cate Blanchett. But like with NBC in the 60s, US producers still wanted to edit Studio Ghibli films to make them more accessible to Americans. One rumor that I quite like to believe is that a producer received a samurai sword in the mail with a note on it that just read "no cuts." That is a power move. And Disney was hesitant to also use the term anime, because they thought that most Americans in the late 90s saw anime and thought of violent and sexual content. But the term anime in Japan meant everything. Kids, teens, adults, violence, magic, and sci-fi. Despite this, Western audiences loved that Japanese stories made the difference between adult and children's content appear almost non-existent. People were getting that stories weren't just children's cartoons like Disney was offering up.
And they're also not afraid to delve into like more adult themes, and I feel like that's what
I'm trying to tell you, bro. Like, think about it. Like, think about like a iconic teen show, like a teen cartoon show that you watched when you were growing up. Like for me, it would be like regular Teen Titans. Like if Teen Titans had more like adult themes, like it probably would have been better. And then it still got Lion King is dark. No, it is not. One character died in Lion King. That doesn't mean it's dark. A singular death. And you don't even see him die. It's just assumed. It's just assumed, you know?
You know, they're not afraid to,
actually
go
see him die.
into like the darkness. And I think that's what really draws people in.
It's not dark.
So it's one thing just watching a bunch of anime, reading about it online, but if I really want to immerse myself in this world, I want to speak to the community, and I figured coming to AnimeCon would probably be the best place to start.
Have y'all been to an anime convention?
What brings me to AnimeCon is personally the community.
We're both really into anime. It's just cool.
I've met so many awesome people through cosplay.
Like, there is so many different genres that you can go for, and there's something for everyone.
There's an awful lot more anime available in the West than there was when I first started looking at it all those years ago.
Throughout this whole process, the thing that kept coming up was the fandom and the power of the anime community. We've been here speaking to people, I don't know, for a good hour. And can you see this grin on my face? Everybody is so open to talking to us and sharing their love of anime. And I feel a tad out of place because look at me and look at everybody else. But obviously I have a plan to fix that, I always do. I've got me and Mac costumes. Mac doesn't know about this part of the plan, so I'm gonna go find him and we're gonna blend in. Alright, I got you an outfit.
No way. Is it a Pikachu outfit?
Whoa. Honestly, the things that we do on this YouTube channel, I never thought this would be watched.
It's not even that bad.
Anime conventions in Japan go back as far as the late 70s. They were usually sponsored by the studios themselves. And the term otaku was thrown around and used to stereotype them as socially awkward.
But I mean, you gotta think about it like this though. Like, as a kid, you're seeing a lion die, right? Like, that's not really as negative as seeing like a human die in an anime. Like, if I see a human die versus a lion die, which one do you think is gonna have more effect? You know, which one is gonna hit more like darker? That's what I'm saying. Like, you know, I mean, yes, it has themes, but like compared to Disney, compared to anime, like they can't even compare. You know. That's what I'm saying.
2024, I'm walking around one of these conventions in Tottenham, North London, and it's amazing.
A lot of us are growing up being the weirdo. It's nice to be able to find people who actually are like, you're not weird, you're like us. And like, even though we all come from a different background, we share that interest. You know, it feels like I have my people here.
We were just rolling around AnimeCon and we just ran into some subscribers who have some great outfits on, I must say.
Well, it's really a community that's all about doing what you love, what you like.
Now you can literally see anyone from all over the world that is richly loving it. Like me as well, I started experimenting with my scarf as well. So when you really want to feel at home, cons are really the best place to go to, I think.
I now see the appeal of cosplay. I want to do this properly, and I feel like this outfit works, but it could be better. Maybe next year. We've been speaking to people who've been fans of anime for the last 10, 15 years. People that have been working in this industry for the last 20, 25 years. But it was only 4 years ago that anime really went mainstream.
Industry watchers say the COVID-19 pandemic gave many Americans the time to dive into the world of anime.
The global demand for anime content skyrocketed between 2020 and 2022, growing by 118%, making it the fastest growing genre in the world. In 2021, Sony acquired Crunchyroll, an anime streaming service, for around $1.2 billion. Netflix and Amazon Prime both continue to invest in anime content. Streaming services are also fighting for exclusive content and distribution rights for big names like Studio Ghibli. Today, Japan's content industry is worth $38 billion. This influx of investment, both in Japan and abroad, does mean it can employ more artists. According to Netflix's head of anime, there are only about 5,000 anime artists and creators at work in Japan today. That's way smaller than studios in America, who employ thousands more. Pixar alone has a staff of over 1,200. So while the hype and popularity towards anime is great for increasing the industry in Japan's economy, there isn't a huge workforce, and working conditions within animation studios in Japan have been pretty dicey. Anime has always worked with a tight budget that avoids or conceals the use of computer graphics. This means working really long hours, and it's an industry known for violating labor laws in the past. Tezuka set this precedent for labor issues back in the 50s. He was obsessed with productivity and building an efficient production pipeline for manga, and the result became the blueprint for the industry for decades. The main two components to make this work were low pay and inhumane working hours.
That's
when
crazy,
Tezuka
man.
got the opportunity to turn Atom into an anime series, there was barely any animators in Japan who could help him. So he had his production team work 7-day weeks, sleeping under their desks, and messed up their hands from consistent drawing that left some illustrations smudged with blood.
Absolutely not.
Okay, I'm back from AnimeCon. That was so much fun. I don't really have any skin in the game. I just observed a bunch of dedicated fans having just the best time in a room where everybody else is into the same thing and feeling the same way. You could really tell from their stories and the passion that anime as a genre has had such a long journey to get to where it is today. There's a sort of circular motion to it where Japan closed itself off from foreign influence only to then fall in love with other art forms, leading to its own stylistic accomplishments going global. And I wonder if the loose thread of the basic aesthetics that makes up Japanese animation that weaves through all the films and shows regardless of genre or age rating is what allows anime to keep being relevant and finding new audiences. Because there's now so many choices, and when you go looking for it, there's actually a lot of nuance within all the artistic styles. Hey, thank you for making it all the way to the end of this video.
That was a good
if you're
video.
new around here,
Great
please
video.
consider subscribing to the channel, and also
Great
let me know.
video, Faultline. Great video. I mean, for someone who didn't know much about anime, you did a good job talking about the past. You know, I mean, you didn't really talk about how it beat Disney, but other than that, you know, great video. So you liked the video? You'll like this one too. Go ahead and click on that. Yeah. You're still here? So you don't fuck with me? Alright, I'ma just.